Jill Weiner.
Hi, my name is Jill Weiner, and I'm here with Catskill Citizens for Safe Energy. We are a grassroots organization with over 8,000 members. And I'd like to say that I believe that the industry has a truth problem. Their PR machine is spinning faster than a fracking drill bit, but public relations cannot prevent the contamination, environmental degradation, and economic decline that will accompany fracking in New York State. It also seems that the DEC and the administration has a truth problem too. It's a little bit different though. They don't seem to hear the truth. We are asking for the DEC to rely on non-industry funded scientific and economic studies. They do exist, but not so much in this new draft. I'd like to talk a little bit about tourism. So across the state, tourism this past year increased by 8%. Tourism here in Sullivan County is up almost 11% this year. It generated $42 million in state and local taxes. And additionally, somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of the homes in our county are vacation homes. But I am afraid that people are not going to want a vacation home in a high-impact industrial area. I mean, really, if you wanted to live in a high-impact industrial area, Elizabeth, New Jersey is really lovely. If second homeowners flee the region and the real estate market crashes and service industry and construction trades crash, what really are we to do? There'll be a reduce in the tax base. And what does the DEC draft SGEIS have to say about all of this? Only that, and I quote, some industries in the regional economies may contract as a result of the proposed natural gas development. DEC, thanks a lot, but what are we going to do about it? Basically, the draft acknowledges that in order to extract shale gas, agriculture and tourism will be impacted, and yet there's no mention of any effective mitigation to counter these losses. Does the DEC think that the thousands of people employed by tourism in Sullivan County will all of a sudden close their doors and learn to drive trucks? Will we be forced to turn our B&Bs into man camps to house transient workers? Will our cultural venues, will Bethel Woods roll up their red carpets? Western New York is not to be used as a sacrificial energy colony to be looted in order to enrich out-of-state gas corporations or for political gain. Fracking will be a disaster for our region and for the people who live here, and they know it. Catskill Citizens recently conducted polls of Sullivan and Delaware counties and found that 7 out of 10, 70% of the people who live here do not want fracking in their towns. And across the state, voters recently elected dozens of candidates who made plain their opposition to fracking.
Thank you, ma'am. May I have Moorhead? May I have Moorhead? Ma'am, can we have a copy of your comments for the court report, please? Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mav Moorhead. I'm with NYH20 Citizens Group in New York City. It's important to note here that the responsibility of the DEC simply does not lie solely with the toxic drilling and waste hydraulic fracturing incurs, but also with its intended purpose, which is to capture a particularly potent mix of toxic product. If that purpose is to deliver a product that is potentially deadly to the receivership, then the resultant purpose of that extraction should become null and void. Radiation is the central focus of my comment today. James W. Ring, he's a Winslow Professor of Physics Emeritus at Hamilton College, in part states that the half-life of radon-222 itself is 3.8 days. Because radium is chemically active like radon, it will go into a solution with the fracking fluid, mostly water, and will show up where when this fluid is pumped out. Tests of this pumped out fluid from wells in New York State give dangerously high concentrations of radon-226. In one case, as much as 267 times the EPA limit for wastewater discharge. Thus, it's clear that the Marcellus Shale is radioactively hot with high concentrations of radon-226 that's producing radon-227 at a high rate. Furthermore, this radioactivity of the wastewater is one example of many others of a major problem of hydrofracking. and that is the cleansing of the fluid so that it doesn't harm the environment when it's pumped out of the fractured shale. Indeed, the problem is even more difficult if the water is to be made potable. It must then meet an EPA requirement for radon 226 that's 12 times more stringent than that for wastewater discharge. Hence the concern expressed by the DEC for the watersheds of New York City and Syracuse. Existing water treatment plants simply cannot sufficiently cleanse the toxins in the wastewater, and they have no means of dealing with the radioactivity problem at all. I have a number of different facts that are stated in my testimony here, and in for brevity's sake, I will go ahead and just mention that also there's another fellow by the name of Dr. Marvin Resnikoff, who's a senior associate of Radioactive Waste Management Associates. DEC is not fully aware of the enormity of the radioactive waste from the Marcellus Shale. He goes on to say that facilities don't yet exist to remove radioactivity from the brine or pipes from the Marcellus Shale. They have to be built, and unless the industry is convincing that no one will be harmed, it will be impossible for the industry to argue that point. They haven't yet made that argument yet. They have to remove this material from the brine or the pipes, or remove the pipes. In closing, I'm just going to tell you that the radioactivity level in the pipes is something that has not been discussed, it has not been fully explored, and the DEC should absolutely make that a priority as part of the study.
Buck Moorhead.
Hi, Buck Moorhead with NYH2O. First and foremost, this activity is intrinsically unsafe. 6% of well casings fail immediately, 12% by the first year. By the second, 21% have failed, 31% by the fifth year. These regulations will not change these percentages. That failure cannot be regulated. Contrary to countless industry ads, this is not America's or New York State's answer to its economic problems and the road to energy independence. It is a Trojan horse. The reserves are 80% less, according to the SGEIS, than stated in the study. Well life is not 30 years, more between 5 and 10. Hydrocarbon gas, let's call it what it is, will not bring much money into the state. 80% of the money will leave the state. It is capital intensive. Rigs, trucks, compressors, pipes, these are purchased out of state and will come from there. Most labor is from out of state. New local jobs will be very limited. The industry's jobs math is very fuzzy. Not addressed in the economic study. Predictable loss of jobs in tourism, recreation, farming, wineries, universities. Not addressed the mortgage dilemma. Not addressed the value of ecological services provided by the environment, carbon sequestration, air and water filtration, flood and stormwater management, to name a few. With respect to the Trojan horse of energy independence, let's look at the history in the Barnett Shale. In a study of 9,100 out of 15,000 wells in the Barnett, only 6% are considered to meet minimum economic thresholds. The rest are uneconomic. That's a lot of environmental and community degradation for shooting a lot of blanks in well drilling. With gas price at $4, it is not economic. It is not expected to be economically viable until it reaches $5, which might be by 2020. So why do it? Asia wants our gas. The price in Asia is indexed to oil, which puts it at $12 to $15 and makes it profitable even with the shipping. There's a great push for pipelines and LNG plants to export this gas. America will not be powered by cheap domestic gas. We're being encouraged to convert power plants and transportation to hydrocarbon gas. This gas will go to the highest bidder, even if it is the Asian market. We will be left with fragmented, industrialized landscape, ruined air and water, public health problems, and potentially bankrupt rural communities, and we will be paying top dollar for a fossil fuel. It is time to draw a line in the sand right here, right now in New York State against this industry. First, say no, ban it here in New York, lead the way for the rest of the nation. Second, take subsidies given to the industry and give them to renewable energy. Third, encourage and support deep energy saving strategies. 40% of our energy is used in buildings. It can be reduced by 80% beginning right now. Fourth, invest in green energy jobs.
Louise Aragon. Louise Aragon.
Thank you. My name is Luis Aragon. I'm the Planning Commissioner for Sullivan County. I wish to thank the department for agreeing to come to Sullivan County to hear us here. Our concerns have been clearly voiced during the scoping process and previous testimony. We are particularly attuned to the health of the Delaware River. While the Delaware River basin encompasses a much larger area covering 6 states, Sullivan County controls 70-mile length of the upper Delaware River scenic and recreational river along the Pennsylvania border. Known for clean, free-flowing waters, world-renowned fisheries, and protected vistas, the upper Delaware River attracts 20 million visitors and generates 70 million tourism revenue. Let's please preserve the Delaware River. I wish to address issues where the Sullivan County Legislature urges further action to mitigate challenges posed by development of the Marcellus Shale. With respect to concerns over drilling activity exacerbating the impact we have seen from flooding in recent years, we urge that a ban on drilling in all flooding zones, that is both 1-year and 500-year zones, be enacted. We urge banning all open pit storage within our region. If this cannot be established at the state level, we request respect at the state level for local authorities seeking to ban this practice. We also urge the highest safety and specifications for flowback storage, requiring double-lined steel storage tanks. Furthermore, we believe that it is necessary that the DEC issue specifications for structurally anchoring tanks and other structures containing fracking materials to resist movement during severe flood or freeze-thaw cycles. The county continues to take issue with the DEC's approach of deferring completely to the Public Service Commission on assessing impacts from the network of gathering lines, pipelines, and compressor stations that will be required to bring the gas from the drilling sites to market. This approach segments the impacts of natural gas development in the Marcellus Shale, the Marcellus Shale in contradiction of SECRA. We therefore request that the department undertake a thorough analysis of the impacts of transmission networks as part of the SGEIS. While the revised draft gives great attention to and creates measures for monitoring and protecting aquifers and water wells, it is still unclear what mitigation measures are proposed or even possible if contamination of water wells, groundwater aquifers, or surface water networks occurs under this program. The county and many of its towns maintain stringent land use practices to protect and maintain these resources, such as requiring special use permits for clear-cut forested areas or more than a few acres. The regulations governing natural gas development must at least be as rigorous as these laws. Thank you.
Can I have your comment, sir? Ramsey Adams.
I'm Ramsey Adams with Catskill Mountain Keeper. I would like to say that the good people at the DEC are overworked and understaffed. Today's a perfect example. They couldn't even put on a public hearing that everybody could participate in. And it's just a perfect example of the situation that we're in. This agency is not ready to regulate the biggest industry in the world. And I respectfully ask the judge to consider holding another hearing in Sullivan County and perhaps consulting with Louise Aragon, our planning commissioner, to make sure there's a facility big enough for everybody to be in, and so we don't have to stand out in the rain. This is not a public, fair meeting. The draft supplemental environmental impact statement is fatally flawed. First of all, they want to let the industry drill in the Catskill Park. They want to let the industry drill in the upper Delaware scenic recreational river. And those are just two perfect examples of how short-sighted and inadequate this whole process has been. How can you drill in the Catskill Park? How can you do that? What are we talking about? What are we doing here that we have to stand up and defend one of the oldest parks in America? The total cumulative impact is the key to everything. I mean, that's what this is all about. What are going to be the cumulative impacts from drilling? The DE says we can't do that. We can't do a cumulative impact. Well, yes, you have to do a cumulative impact. It's your obligation. And if you can't do it now, take 5 years and do it right. There's so many problems with it, but I'll just list, some of the key findings that we have. We're going to spend a lot of grassroots money to do the work that the DEC can't do because they're understaffed and under-resourced. We're going to submit detailed comments, but basically no real cumulative impact, insufficient setbacks, inadequate protections for unfiltered watersheds, and inadequate protections for the other watersheds and aquifers. Toxic waste could be and probably will be handled as hazardous waste, and the rulemaking before the environmental review is complete. You're jamming everything down our throat. You guys are going to try to get the rulemaking in place while we're still in the middle of this process. So again, I respectfully request that you hold another hearing in Sullivan County in a venue that can hold the people who are concerned about this issue. Thank you very much.
Weiss-Barczak.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Andy Weiss-Barczak. I have a PhD in environmental toxicology. I also take this SGEIS personally because my house has a well. Natural gas, I want to remind you, is a fossil fuel. And I'm wondering why we're even allowing anybody to extract any more. I would think Irene and Lee have pointed out to us that global warming is affecting New York to the tune of over $500,000 this year alone in damage. There is a published scientific paper titled Methane Contamination of Drinking Water Accompanying Gas Well Drilling and Hydraulic Fracturing, published in the Proceeding of the National Academy of Science in the USA. And this shows definitely that the methane in these wells did not come from the bacteria that naturally produce it, but from deep wells. There was also a comment to that article which said that Ronald E. Bishop estimates that nearly 2% of such gas wells may end up contaminating groundwater with fracking fluids. He also pointed out that 50% of the new natural gas wells recently inspected in Quebec leaked methane, which is not only toxic, but it is a fossil fuel. There's also a report in the journal Science this month about earthquakes in the United Kingdom, which were likely caused by fracking. This report was paid for by the energy company that was fracking about half a mile away from the earthquakes. They conclude that this is unusual and it will not happen again, and they're only small earthquakes. However, they also point out that the fluid that is forced into these cracks lubricates the rocks so that if there is any stress to cause an earthquake, it will make earthquakes easier. And that these earthquakes are also shallow. Therefore, they cause more destruction than these low magnitude earthquakes would if they were deep. So here are two scientific articles about the hazards of fracking that we need to take into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Jillian Barbara.
Hi, my name is Jillian Barbara, and I have had the wonderful opportunity to run a multi-generational...
Can you step a little closer to the microphone?
I've had the wonderful opportunity to run a multi-generational dairy farm with my father. I was born and raised in Allegheny County, which is continually listed as one of the poorest counties in the state. There's more than 145,000 acres of agricultural land in my county. I'm speaking on behalf of my community members, which are landowners and mostly farmers. They feed your families. We are good stewards of our land. You will not find much anti-drilling sentiment in my community. Some farmers have taken jobs with the oil and gas industry in Pennsylvania to save their farms so they can keep providing food for your families. I am confident in the DEC's ability to continue regulating drilling activity in our state. It's been going on a long time. The gas and oil available under our property is something all of us here today use every day. It is used to feed every single one of us here today. We are at risk of losing our farmlands, which provide food for your families. The land that provides food for all of us is being purchased by out-of-state investors who will not be spending their profits from oil and gas leases and royalties to help us sustain our communities. They return to their own communities with their profits from my neighbors' properties. We are losing our tax bases, losing our population, and losing our farms. My county needs jobs. They need the job opportunities that the oil and gas industry can provide. Please realize the time that you take to make your decision will cause increased, prolonged poverty and irreversible economic loss to my community. Please move swiftly in making your decisions. Thank you for your time.
After our next speaker, we're going to call the next 10 people down, please. Our next speaker is Kathleen Nolan.
Good afternoon. My name is Kathleen Nolan, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the High Peaks office of Catskill Mountain Keeper in Woodstock. I'm a physician and board-certified pediatrician with training in epidemiology and research design. My remarks focus on the health hazards associated with the possibility of introducing hydrofracking into New York State, the difficulty of adequately mitigating these hazards, and the woeful lack of protection afforded under the DEC's currently proposed revised draft supplementary generic impact statement and permitting regulations. To set the context for our public health analysis, let me begin by making a few very easily supported observations. 1, the fluids proposed for injection underground in the fracking process contain known toxins. 2, the returned fracking fluids and escaping gases contain the original toxins plus additional toxins such as volatile organic compounds, radioactive materials, and heavy metals. 3, some of these toxins are poisonous in parts per billion, most do not biodegrade, and many have been proven to cause illness and death in humans and experimental animals through conditions such as asthma, cancer, nerve degeneration, and serious birth defects. 4, no adequate mechanisms are in place or required by the proposed regulatory framework to contain these toxins and prevent their dispersion. 5, no mechanisms are in place or required by the proposed regulatory framework to detect health problems specifically related to toxins introduced by fracking. 6, no mechanisms are in place or required by the proposed regulatory framework to treat health problems specifically related to these toxins. 7, no mechanisms are in place beyond costly and difficult personal litigation to hold polluters responsible for illnesses and death caused by the toxins. 8, additional illness, injury, and death may be introduced by earthquakes, explosions, and industrial-level truck traffic caused by or related to fracking activities. And 9, no mechanisms are in place to hold polluters responsible for those illnesses, injuries, and death caused by those fracking-related activities. We can view the introduction of large-scale fracking operations across New York State as a very poorly designed experiment being proposed by the gas industry. If I were asked to review this research as a member of an institutional review board, could I find grounds for approving such an experiment? No. Permitting this experiment would be irresponsible. Irresponsible because the possible benefits to those who are at risk of injury are not proportionate to the likely harms. Irresponsible because those who are at risk of injury are not adequately informed. Irresponsible because those who are at risk of injury cannot readily remove themselves from the hazards. Irresponsible because containment of the hazardous and potentially lethal toxins and contaminants is not mandated and may not even be possible.
Thank you. We're going to call our next group of speakers.
At this time, I'd like to call speakers 22 through 31. George Cory, K-O-U-R-Y. John Armstrong. Please be seated in the first row. Teresa Dixon. Rudy Hunter. Ellen Weiner. Thank you. Jeff Goler. Carolyn Price. Linda Armstrong. Noel Van Swole. Fred Peckham. Please be seated in the first row here.
Our next speaker is Ted Rogalski. Quiet, please.
Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Ted Rogalski. My comments are based on a 30-year career with the United States Environmental Protection Agency and the Federal Water Pollution Control Agency. I served as a chief legal counsel for each of these agencies, especially for the Federal Water Pollution Control Agency, in enforcing and implementing the Clean Water Acts of 1956, 1965, and 1995. Those are elementally the same kinds of laws that the state of DEC is faced with at the present time. 30 years of experience in 3 minutes, in fact, 2 minutes to give a few comments. My experience brings me to the following observations. First, in conclusion, I'm thanking you for conducting hearings on your very ambitious attempts to spell out a perfect permitting program. I wish the DEC the wisdom to write and implement a perfect permit. It's not in the permit itself, but in the implementation and enforcement of the program that I see that the Department of Ecology needs assistance. And I do say, based on my 30 years of working with the federal agency, that what the DEC in this state needs is the support of your governor, unqualified support of your governor, and unqualified support of your state legislators in giving you generous funding and a solid legal foundation to support sound environmental practices. And if you don't get that kind of support and money, your very good efforts and intentions will not really succeed in protecting our beautiful New York countryside. And this is a very special state. Specific comments, you really need absolute liability in your statutes regarding the performance of those who are responsible for the drilling. And you need enforcement, solid enforcement of pollution control laws. In the federal experience, it wasn't until we got into multi-million-dollar penalties and, in fact, jail sentences for those who violated and created environmental pollution. I don't see those kinds of events. As to jobs, I think I would say you ought to require 10% of every permit.
Thank you, sir.
10% to, yeah,
Thank you.
to be dedicated to environmental work.
Can I have your comments, please? Thank you. George Cory.
My name is George Cory. I'm a resident of the town of Olive in Ulster County. This most recent study by the DEC is woefully inadequate. The gas industry, by its own admission, notes that hazards resulting directly from hydrofracking have resulted in injury, loss of life, severe damage or destruction of property, natural resources, pollution, and other environmental damage, all in the homeowner's backyard. All mortgages prohibit such hazardous activity and substances on mortgaged properties. If a person's property value is to go down, or even worse, they have to abandon their land, who's going to reimburse them? Will it be the gas companies, the governor, the state? Looking at another issue, we learn daily of severe health repercussions such as bronchitis, asthma, emphysema, and cancer affecting adults and children as a result of this toxic process. Who is going to pay for the people's health care? Precisely what sort of funding will be set up to pay for these health problems? What specific studies have been conducted to determine the health impacts related to hydrofracking? We must not proceed a step further until this is completed and can be decided upon by the citizens who will be directly affected. A New York Times article on November 25th states that pro-drilling interests have contributed thus far $403,000 to New York candidates and parties and $100,000 to the governor himself for his presidential campaign. The governor is the one who's going to make this final decision in this process. The monies he's taking from the gas industry towards his presidential campaign is clearly a conflict of interest. I am here to demand that the governor recuse himself from any decision-making or voting on this issue from this day forward.
Excuse me, quiet, please.
Industry fat cats smile and lie to us every day on television. If this process is so safe, why are they spending so much money to convince us of it? Show us some real, independent, legitimate scientific studies. Give us a complete list of the chemicals used in the drilling process. My message to the DEC, the gas companies, the governor, and all of the other politicians who are on the take: keep this process out of our state. There is an abundance of sustainable energy technology available to us. This state can and should be a world leader in this technology. It will create real jobs for this generation and generations to come and help us to preserve our pristine water supply and beautiful environment. Thank you.